and welcome into the latest edition of ESPN FC Live. My name is Kay. This is Janusz alongside me, as always, with you on a Tuesday, but we're also with you on a Wednesday and a Friday as well. It's a revolving cast. We always touch on the biggest topics from the football world and preview a lot what's coming up. Obviously, a big talk at the moment is the Premier League title race. That's where we're going to be starting today. And then with the Champions League hitting the calendar once again, we'll get Janusz's take on the ties that we've got coming up. Some big ties too to be getting our teeth into. But let's start with the Premier League title race right now, Janusz. Boy, is it close. Arsenal and Liverpool both tied in first and second, respectively, on 71 points, 1 point behind them. In third is Manchester City on 70 points. Now, it wasn't too long ago that you did pick Liverpool this time around as your favourites to go all the way and do it this season. Has that changed, or are you sticking with them?
Well, it has to change. There's a bit of a blink, although, I mean, Liverpool are very much in it as well. I mean, we can say all we want about them dropping points against Manchester United, but I think just the fact that they came back in it keeps Liverpool in the title hunt. We forget that it's still a point away at Old Trafford, but there is a blink. I think there's a little bit of a momentum that's lost in all of that, and because it's a three-team race, I just don't feel as good about this Liverpool team at the moment as I do about the other teams, in particular Manchester City.
So what changed with Liverpool for you, like specifically? Because it was only a month ago that you were going with them. And I know it's close even in your own head, but you did pick them.
Right. I mean, I guess we can kind of tie that into, some of the points that, what it's going to take for each team, or what are the worries is that, I just felt that, they're just lacking that ruthlessness, and maybe some of the key players maybe, I look at somebody like Mo Salah. Obviously, there's been some injuries. He hasn't had the run of games that he normally does have. But when you look at the game against Manchester United, he just didn't play well. I'm not talking about missing one or two very good chances that you expect him to put away, but he wasn't at his best. And when he isn't, obviously Liverpool loses, 25-30% of their might, if you will. So I just, looking at the schedule, it's not easy. And because the bar is so high right now, I just think that it's going to be a little bit more difficult than it was a month ago.
So they're your concerns for Liverpool. That's what obviously we're going to get into with each of the teams. If we're to ask you your concerns for Arsenal, you know what? I'm going to wait for Arsenal. Tell me what your concerns with Man City are.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Tell me what your concerns for Man City are, where they might encounter some problems.
Well, for Manchester City is obviously, this is not the team from last year. They're not firing on all cylinders. Not to say that they're not very good, but they were spectacular last season. I mean, nobody could touch them, I feel. And they've proven that, winning every trophy there was to be won just about, right? So they're getting there. Remember, last season at this stage, or long ago, we absolutely knew what their starting 11 was, and we were very, very comfortable. We can talk about depth and rotation, and they've been doing a great job at that, just as Arsenal have and Liverpool. But last season, when it came to the biggest matches, you absolutely knew who that was going to be. This year, it's a little bit different, although they're getting there. So that's why, to me, they're the favorites, because I see Jack Grealish, who's slowly coming back to his best form right now. You can now see Bernardo Silva once again, perhaps being on that right-hand side, or maybe next to Rodri, I suppose. The big issue still is, Phil Foden. Should he be playing number 10? Should he be playing over De Bruyne? I don't think that's an issue. At least it isn't for me. Play both of them as number 10s, which I think we're going to see again. And that's when you're going to see maybe Manchester City pulling ahead of everybody. But there's some questions, not to mention a situation in the back because of injuries. So they're not as solid as they were last year. So there are some concerns, and perhaps that's why we have such a close race.
We do, but you've just said for you they're the favourites now. So it's not that much of a concern as it would be with the other two teams for you right now.
No, not as much. You're talking Arsenal. I think it's very, very close when it comes down to the favorites. Look, logic to me is everything. And when I look at the schedule and I look at what Arsenal and Liverpool in particular have to go through, and I look at Manchester City, who are just, in my opinion, coming back maybe to their best because of the quality and depth of squad. I just think that they're going to run out the schedule, and it's going to be close. And I'm not saying that it's impossible, because I think Arsenal, if they win it, are going to be absolutely worthy champions.
So Arsenal, what would your concerns be for them? Because I've heard you say before, Janusz, that you find it difficult to poke holes in this Arsenal side. So can you find any concerns for them? There must be some if you're picking City ahead of them, even if it is just.
Well, you have to learn how to be champions, right? I mean, that's what they've been doing it. Last year, people said that they choked. I think it's absolutely crazy, as I just mentioned before. This was the best Manchester City ever. So I don't see how you choke against a team like that just because you were playing them close and for long periods of time you were at the top of the table. I think it's absolutely crazy when you talk about progress. When you talk about anything else, I mean, look. You can't poke a hole at Arsenal. There just isn't. They're the best. They're top of the league. They're the best team defensively. They're the best team on the attack. They're the best team on set pieces in the Premier League. I think they may be the best team on set pieces in Europe. I didn't check that, but I bet you they're very close, if not the best. They have the experience of last season, and yet they may not win it because the best teams sometimes don't win that. And we've seen that with Liverpool in that season when it was 98, 97 points. I mean, Liverpool could have easily have won it, but they didn't. So, that it's just the nature of that you have to take advantage of the situation. And right now, the schedule doesn't favor Arsenal.
The schedule ahead is, I'm going to read it out because I want to see where you're saying the problem could be, because you're still saying that you find it very difficult to poke holes with this Arsenal side, which really should make them your favourites, yet they're not. And obviously, I know that Manchester City have already won and they've got that about them. So let's go through the schedule and you can stop me when you think there's a concern for them here. So the Champions League.
I can stop you right now if you like.
Okay, sorry, go on.
I don't like to. Yeah, it's the North London derby. I think Arsenal will beat Chelsea. That's obviously a game, even though Chelsea are nowhere near their best. That's why I think Arsenal will win it, and that game's going to be emotional. And you're going to have to throw out. We saw what Liverpool and Manchester United have done. Manchester United and Chelsea are very much the same. Without identity, you don't know what you're going to get from them from week to week. It's going to be special. It's a London derby, but I think Arsenal will win that game. And then there's going to be that game against Spurs, who have themselves a lot to play for, and that's where emotions, sometimes take over. If Arsenal beat Chelsea and Spurs, then Arsenal will be champions.
So it's those two London derbies, the Arsenal against Chelsea and then the North London derby. They're your biggest concern. That could be a potential stumbling block there.
Well, of course. I mean, you can always mention, the Champions League, but I think for Manchester City, it's not going to be any easier. So that levels or equals itself out just a little bit, right? Manchester City facing Real Madrid, but you have to look into things like that. If you want to get more technical, it's obviously, there's a way of stopping Arsenal, just like there's a way, I suppose, to stop everyone. But
so there is a hole to be poked.
Yes, Porto has shown that. There's been times in the Premier League that if you stop the combination between Martin Odegaard and Saka, this is not the same team, because I suppose if I had to go somewhere, I don't want to say that Arsenal are one-dimensional, but there certainly isn't a clear plan B when that little combination, when the wide games does not work for Arsenal, which Porto really, really exposed, by the way, in both legs. Of course, they didn't go through, but I'm sure everybody has watched that. And, if you play high, if you make Saka and Martinelli or Trossard or whoever else is on that side, Gabriel Jesus, if you make them defend, if you take away what they enjoy the most, which is attack, then you can get through Arsenal.
Because they drew with Chelsea in October, they drew with Spurs in September when it comes to Premier League play. So obviously that's your concern there. It feels like your belief is strong in them, but then I hear you saying this. So how strong is your belief in Arsenal doing it? Because you say you still wouldn't be surprised if they did go on and do it.
It's big, as I've said to you, Kay. I think I look at this Arsenal team and they have done everything possible to be champions. But again, it's so difficult when you face somebody that has the know-how, has won it so many times in the last decade, has won it very, very close, and you're presented with that schedule, right? I mean, last year, as I've said, you can't fault Arsenal. You can't call it a choke because it wasn't even close. I think we all knew that this was going to happen. They lost all their games against Arsenal last season. Remember, it was kind of weird because I think that the first leg happened in the new year, right? They had to wait to face Manchester City and prove that they're worthy. This year it's a little bit different. They've beaten them. They drew the game away to Manchester City. Arsenal have done extremely well against the top teams, but I think if you ever going to say they choked, then they would have done it against Fulham, West Ham, Villa, and Newcastle, and that was November, December. It's kind of hard to say that you choked that early in the season because the season hasn't even developed itself back then. So here we are. They're doing absolutely everything, to be in a position to win that, and they're in that position. That's why I'm so conflicted. That's why it's so difficult, because as bad as that season is, look what they have done recently on both sides of the ball, just absolutely flying right now. So there's that possibility, because who's to say that they're not going to get through that schedule? But you have to go with logic. I'm not big on bookies, but I'm sure there isn't one that has given Arsenal as favorites. Is there? Maybe there is. I don't know.
Well, the last time I looked, but that was last week, and obviously it's changing all the time, and it's changed over the weekend, I'm sure. Whereas Liverpool were favourites, Manchester City were second favourites, even though they were third in the table, and Arsenal were then third favourites. But obviously different odds at different times. Can you just elaborate on what you mean when you say they're one-dimensional?
Well, as I've said, I mean, the wide game is prevalent for them, and they have to be absolutely spot on. Especially on the right hand side. If you look at Odegaard, I mean, his combination play and the enjoyment of playing with Saka, it's much bigger than if Martinelli plays or Gabriel Jesus or Trossard. And some teams can read that. You have to be consistent. I think you look at Martin Odegaard, who I think is probably the best pure playmaker in the Premier League right now. I can't think of anybody else really. And he's a little bit different. Some teams in the Premier League don't necessarily have that sort of a player, right? A little bit old school in a way. But as I've said, I mean, if you pin Saka and Martinelli, I'm assuming that he's going to be back and playing, or Gabriel Jesus, who is not a natural wide player, then I think you can have success. And then after that, it becomes a little bit more difficult, because there isn't this, even though Kai Havertz is playing, finally showing his quality. Do I think that Kai Havertz is going to be delivering these sort of goals in the right moments for the rest of the season? That's doubtful. It's possible, but then you say to yourself, yes, can they grind through the games because they're so good defensively and still withstand, say, if Saka and Odegaard or the white game isn't at their best? Possible, but I just don't think that they have the variety of play that, say, Manchester City for sure have, and even Liverpool to a degree, if and when they get everybody back, because that's certainly when you talk about Liverpool and their concerns is that the lack of being ruthless, right? I mean, if Diogo Jota comes in, that gives you a different dimension. Obviously, not having Trent takes away from the way you play the game as well. But in terms of Arsenal, I've always felt that so much depends on Martin Odegaard and the white game.
So if there are pillars and fundamentals when it comes to being a champion, and we say, you have to have, say, these 4 components, one of them is to not be one-dimensional. Would that be a
Well, you have to have a balance, right? You have to have a different way of winning it. And by the way, I'm not saying that Arsenal doesn't have it, because they can't, they have an identity. I like teams that do go out there and attack and take risks. And that's everything that Arsenal does do. As I've said, over the years, even when they were bad, they have never, ever lost their identity. What's changed right now, that we can no longer go to what we used to go to and say that they're soft. We no longer talk about Patrick Vieira, do we? Right? No longer talk about, Tony Adams or, needing the central defenders. They have all of that. And with everything else, even if, because, I've been saying that Porto have figured out a way. Well, in a way they didn't, right? I mean, they showed a blueprint that it's possible. They made it very difficult winning that game, but they didn't get through. So in a way, Arsenal did find ways, and I think that's possible. But I think there's going to be games that are left in the schedule when emotions come in and maybe things don't go your way. That's I mean, just simple as that. You look at Manchester City and that know-how, that experience of a very, very close title races, the experience of winning everything. This is where you have to kind of give the nod to Manchester City if you just lose logic. But, our game isn't logical, so I'm perfectly fine if I'm wrong with this. And as I've said, if Arsenal see it through, absolutely deserves. I mean, in fact, I think so far they have, for me, been the best team in the Premier League on both sides of the ball, and the table shows that, by the way.
Right. So, what's your percentage chance that they win it, Arsenal?
If I just go between two teams, because I don't want to get in the weeds, because that's going to be boring for a listener. But I give 45 to 55.
Okay. 45 to 55. So then maybe they would be your favourites.
No, I mean, I'm giving 55 to Manchester City.
Oh, okay, sorry. So you're splitting that between. I thought you were saying between 45 and 55%. I'm like, well, that's quite a big ballpark there that we're looking at. All right. Well, we're going to revisit this topic, don't you? But we must move on to talk about the Champions League. Two absolutely brilliant ties today. I want to talk about Arsenal's against Bayern first. Obviously, Bayern in all sorts of trouble right now, but they definitely have the experience when it comes to this tournament. Not so much Arsenal, but then we're just judging on this season. There's loads of factors coming into play. First of all, your overall view on this before we get into the Harry Kane factor.
Well, I think this is an incredible opportunity again. And, you can tie that into the title race, right? Because, I mean, getting through Bayern Munich, regardless of what we think of Bayern Munich right now, you've mentioned the experience. You can never put them away or put them aside without actually beating them on the pitch. I think the momentum, if Arsenal went through this tie, would be unbelievable. Would have helped, obviously, in the Premier League race as well, because that confidence, I mean, where do you get that? So it's a bar that... it's been a while, right? I mean, I think it's been like 15 years since Arsenal were in the semifinals. Obviously, it's been a massive bogey team, Bayern Munich, in terms of Arsenal. I think they've lost to them 4 times, right? Even after the group stages. I mean, they haven't had an easy time with Bayern Munich, but this is not the same Bayern Munich, and this is a great opportunity for Arsenal. So I fully expect Arsenal. I mean, look, they've shown they're not afraid of anybody. They don't change for anybody. They don't play according to whom their opponent is. They just do the things that they've gotten them to this level, and that's why that progress that Arsenal Mikel Arteta has made, it's not just in the Premier League, it's showing in the Champions League, because it's been a while since Arsenal were in this position.
This is all that's left for Bayern, though. And on top of that, the storyline of Harry Kane against Arsenal. So Harry Kane's numbers alone this season, as we know, it's 38 goals in 37 games in all competitions. Then we went to look at him against Arsenal. It's 14 goals in 19 meetings against them. Obviously, we're talking about previous club here, and there was a lot more between these two sides when it comes to rivalry. But this is all that Bayern have got left. These players are playing for pride as well as everything else, Janusz, and to stay in this competition.
Well, one thing you have to say, at the very least, at least they know Harry Kane, right? So that nothing is going to come as a surprise to them. And that's the way I would look at it. I mean, stats are great. Harry Kane, it's incredible in a way that, there's a very strong possibility that he's not going to win another title. Who would have thought that before? He's doing his job as he did while he was playing for Spurs, against Arsenal, or anybody else, one of the best out there, one that hasn't won a title. So I just think that normally going into this game, you would have said that the pressure was on Arsenal, but it isn't. The pressure is on Harry Kane and Bayern Munich and Thomas Tuchel right now. And I would love to be in that situation if I'm Arsenal.
All right, let's get to Real Madrid against Manchester City. So many layers to this tie. And obviously, we know what happened last time around when City finally got their way with Real Madrid. In fact, Carlo Ancelotti's spoken about what happened in that second leg against City. And he said his side played without courage and personality, and that cannot happen again. But even playing with courage and personality, is it going to be enough for Real Madrid this time around?
It could be. I mean, this is one of those 50-50s, right? Because, I mean, it's Real Madrid, an excellent team that's kind of trying to get back maybe their best form, very much like Manchester City. These are two different teams, I suppose. For Manchester City, obviously you have to reload just a little bit, as they did, in terms of motivation and how you start the season. And that's never a problem. If you look at for Real Madrid, I think maybe Jude Bellingham's story from the beginning and then his injury just coming back. I mean, they've had so many issues, especially in the back. They're sort of coming back. It's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen. Obviously, Militao is back. I don't suspect that he's going to be in the starting lineup. The question, of course, is going to be who's going to play next to the warrior that Rudiger is. Is it going to be Nacho, or is it going to be Tchouaméni? That's going to be a big story. But, the problem is here that there's so much going forward. These teams do feel very, very comfortable in the way they play. So you're talking, once again, Manchester City, who would want to dominate Real Madrid, which, by the way, if you look at the last couple of seasons, they did dominate Real Madrid. But of course, remember those 2 extra goals in 90 plus minutes that got Real Madrid through, even though they were second best in both legs. And last season, I don't think there was any question that Manchester City were the best team. The worry I would have against Manchester City, that Real Madrid, for a massive club like they are, feels so comfortable playing away from home, playing on the break, being in possession of the game. And both teams have so many game changes, right? Which is so hard to predict. We can sit here and, Vinny Jr. could have an unbelievable game. Jude Bellingham, you see Rodrigo and how much he has developed. Of course, that midfield with Toni Kroos. I mean, we used to talk about Luka Modric, now Toni Kroos, who some thought, including myself, that maybe he's just winding down just a little bit. And look what he's done, not only for Real Madrid, but what he's done coming back to Germany and almost as if he didn't miss a step, and he was away for how long? 3 years, right? So big players change games, and this is going to be absolutely fascinating, because last year I was 100% sure that Manchester City were going to get through Real Madrid. This time, I'm not as sure.
Yeah, Diario has to go with Tchouaméni with Rudiger, but Tchouaméni, Camavinga, Bellingham and Vinicius are all 1 card away from missing the second leg. So obviously that's a big factor. Rudiger, as you mentioned, who'd been a warrior, especially against Haaland, he said it's personal for him when he's coming up against these players and trying to stop them in his role as a central defender. Who goes through the tie, Janusz, this time around?
Yeah, I've been in Manchester City. You're not going to give me one game, huh, to see who's going to go through?
No, because then this makes this piece not as a
I know, I get it. I get it. I mean, I haven't gone against Manchester City in such a long time. I've predicted that Manchester City were going to win this competition back to back, but I'm going to go with Real Madrid this time around. The only worry I have is, as you've said, the number of yellow cards. I obviously, Ancelotti is going to play his best players. He has to trust they're going to be disciplined. There's a good possibility he knows that he's going to miss maybe one, but if it's more, then I worry. But I sometimes go on a gut in games where I'm not 100% sure, because there's so much quality on both sides. I think the return in the Bernabeu may just be enough, and that experience. And I'm going to go against Manchester City for the first time in I don't know how long.
Wow, I know we don't hear that much right here on ESPN FC Live. So that's that tie. And then obviously coming up tomorrow, we've got PSG against Barcelona. How are you seeing this one?
I see two teams that are kind of giving us hope, right? I mean, we kind of forgotten about them. Two massive teams. I like what Luis Enrique is doing, because this project is changing. I don't know if it's not too early for PSG, but if you look at that side of the bracket, you say to yourself, the way PSG have been playing and the way that Barcelona has been playing as of late, a little bit of a rebirth, right? At least in the way we think about those teams. So I wouldn't be shocked to see one of those teams in the final, by the way. Luis Enrique has done a tremendous job. You know how I feel about Kylian Mbappe. For me, he's the best player in the world, one that can change the game any second. So so I like what's happening in Paris. I also like what's happening with Barcelona, and by the looks of it, they're going to be getting some key players back. Christensen is back, is a possibility. We'll see if he plays. Frankie De Jong, another player, Pedri. So even without those key players, and after Xavi has said that he's leaving, now everybody's talking about him possibly staying. So this is going to be very, very tight. And again, the story, of course, of Luis Enrique in Barcelona, Ousmane Dembele, who's been, I think, growing up, I would say, not growing, but growing up in front of our eyes, because we've all had questions about his discipline, about his state of mind, about his mentality. And even though statistics don't tell you that he's had a great season, what he's got, like 1 goal or something like that, but what he's done in creativity, how unselfish has become. I've looked it up, and he's one of the best in Europe in goal creating chances. I think he's got 18. I think he's been a breath of fresh air. They do have an issue on the right hand side because Achraf Hakimi is out, so it's going to be interesting to see what Luis Enrique is going to do, because I think that's that's always going to be a key. Again, you're going to ask me who's going to get through, right? I like home side, so I'm going to stick with Barcelona.
Okay. Did I ask you who gets through the tie of Arsenal Bayern?
I'm sorry?
Did I ask you who gets through the tie of Arsenal Bayern?
No, you did not. And I'm going to go with Arsenal.
Arsenal. Okay. So they've picked Arsenal, not Man City, when it comes to Champions League play.
This is the moment. I mean, as we've said, it's a little bit different in the Premier League, right? Because there are 3 teams involved, and of course, there's still so many games, and to navigate through that, it's not always easy and logical, as we said. But here, with this Bayern Munich, I think this is a rare opportunity for Arsenal to continue this progress under Arteta, to get finally to the semifinal after 15 years. This is one of those things that I think if Arsenal do their job at home and win, any sort of win, and then go away and maybe score a goal, I think the heads will go down. I mean, the psyche of Bayern Munich is so low that any negativity within the game, I think, I'm still surprised in a way that Thomas Tuchel is there. I would have made a decision, because they just need it. As you said, this is their last possible chance, right? And knowing that Tuchel is out, obviously players not responding, losing at home to Borussia Dortmund, losing to Heidenheim after they were leading 2-0. It's just, a goal against, and I think all that negativity pours down, and again, Tuchel for the players is going to be an easy scapegoat. So I think Arsenal's got a feed on that. All guns blazing, really, no pun intended.
If that's a big Arsenal blowout, and sorry, I'm just going to keep going on about this. Just one last question. If Arsenal absolutely blow them away in the first leg, does Tuchel go, even though he's going at the end of the season anyway?
I think there's already talk. I mean, depending on who you're reading.
A vote of confidence, like a vote of confidence. I don't know he's going at the weekend.
Look, I'm not on the inside. I don't know necessarily why they haven't done it. There's talk about Miro Klose or anybody else. I mean, what a winner, what a striker. I mean, they don't need a manager. They just need a fresh page. Right? Because for a player, I mean, Tuchel has taken a lot on himself, and deservedly so, right? I mean, he didn't deliver with a good team, but I think it's a massive cop out for Bayern Munich and their players, because there's still enough talent there to be so much better during this season. I'm not talking just Champions League, so it's a massive cop out that I promise you players will absolutely use. They have been using it, because I don't understand how this is on Tuchel. Say the game against Heidenheim. How is that on Tuchel? It isn't, right? There's a lame duck right there, and I just don't get it. I would have gone in there and said, Thomas, we just have to do it, because maybe, just maybe, players will respond to that. And so I don't understand it. So I think this may happen even if Arsenal wins 1-0. That may just be psychologically. I don't know if that's going to be enough, but 2-0 certainly should be enough for Arsenal to go through.
Okay, we're almost out of time. So rather than a breakdown, tell us who goes through between Atleti and Borussia Dortmund.
Atleti, who's got the second game? See, I forgot.
First game's at the Metropolitano.
Oh, the Metropolitano. Oof. I'm going to go with Dortmund here. And it's not simply because the second leg is at home. I just think that there's something about both teams, by the way, in the Champions League, right? You kind of, it's easy to forget them, but they find a way. No matter what happens domestically, they do have the know-how. They do have the experience. I like what's happening at Dortmund as of late, and I think Dortmund will just... I mean, that second leg of the Metropolitano, you know how big that is. We saw that in the last leg. They don't have that, and Dortmund will take advantage of that.
All right. Well, we will be back soon to see if Janusz will have his mind changed again on the Premier League title race and to revisit those predictions in the Champions League. Thanks for being with us for the latest edition. We'll see you again soon.